So this is
Just don't delay lunch.
this is Roger Simpson from Ontario, part of the group up there, and he's going to do a presentation for us this morning. Roger, it's all yours.
Thanks very much, Will, and thanks for the invitation. And I'm sorry the Canadian-American border is still shut down. But let me give you a bit of a background. Like I'm with REAP Canada. REAP stands for Resource Efficient Agricultural Production. And we work very closely with the warm season grass growers in Ontario. This is one of the farmers in the group, Don Knott, who's the biggest switchgrass seed grower and switchgrass producer in the province of Ontario. So we work very closely with that organization, the Ontario Biomass Producers Association. And we've been working on switchgrass for 30 years. So we got into it because agriculture was in a lot of trouble 30 years ago with low commodity prices. We had surplus production capacity, and it was pretty obvious we had to get rid of farmers, or we had to do something different to find new markets. So we looked at the bioeconomy, the biofiber and the bioenergy markets as new opportunities for agriculture to use our surplus production capacity. And today we have very high commodity prices, largely as a result of the demand enhancement created by the biofuel programs. And that with the advent of the electric vehicle, some of that acreage might not be available in the future for creating demand enhancement. So what we really need to do is figure out how to use our less than best farmlands to produce new products for the new economy and more environmentally benign products. So in 1991, I did quite a bit of research in this whole area, and I saw that the Europeans working a lot on agroforestry systems, and the Americans were working a lot with agroforestry and warm season grasses. And when I was an undergraduate, I learned about warm season grasses for midsummer pasture production. And I thought, wow, that's a great crop, these native grasses, because they're so resource efficient, and they improve the soil, and you can keep them in, for longer periods. And 30 years later, there's a real demand out there for soil carbon restoration, and that these native grasses are unsurpassed in their ability to store carbon. So if we can find a market for these materials, and we can get these carbon storage benefits and some other environmental benefits, it's a real win-win for farmers and society. So my presentation, I'm going to go over just in brief how we do our breeding and what we've done, and how we've kind of like looked at the problem we had at the beginning. Like basically native grasses were slow growing, and they weren't a crop, they were native grasses. And we decided that we had to turn them into field crops. So we've basically been on a 30-year journey to domesticate these native grasses into field crops. So in 1992, we went around many centers in the US. We visited quite a few breeding programs and plant material centers. And we decided that the Americans were onto a pretty good thing with these native grasses for biomass crops, perennial biomass crops. And yeah, we thought that less than best farmlands were the best choice, because it's going to reduce land competition, and that farmers generally are what they are today because of their production capacity on their best lands, and they're much more open to finding out better opportunities on their less than best farmlands, and especially when crop commodity prices are low. And there's very few farmers that are willing to grow native warm season grasses right now on their best farmlands because crop commodity prices are so high. So we need, as a breeder and as a trying to develop this crop, we need to focus on less than best farmlands. And we were told over and over again that these crops need to be easier to grow and faster to establish. So the very first farmer we worked with was in 1992 down in Southern Ontario, around about an hour and a half northwest of Toronto. And he said to us, "Oh my God, like after 6 weeks, our field still looks like pavement." And like, it was the ultimate insult, you know, like we were on a serious research project, we thought, and he was telling us that our crop looked like pavement still. So it was just, we really obvious that we needed to do a lot of work to make this a field crop so that farmers would be happy to plant it and be proud of what they have in front of them. And so easier to grow and faster to establish. The farmers were just screaming that at us, you know, like fix this and make it easy to grow. And then of course the other opportunity is higher yielding, higher yields, lower costs. You know, it's pretty straightforward. And then what we saw was that we needed to widen the maturity range so that these upland switchgrasses that we were growing in Canada, if we could extend the maturity on them, we could get higher yields. And also if we could change the maturity of them and give a wider range, it's better able to supply markets. From what I understand, most of the growers in your group are growing, you know, fall harvested material, and some of them are also growing spring harvested material. Historically in Ontario, about 95% of the crop was spring harvested. We're changing that now with our new genetics so that we get high yield associated with early maturity. And I'll get into that.
Thank you.
So this is some of the first work we did 25 years ago. We put in like performance trials of all the different varieties. And what we saw was that, you know, it's just like corn hybrids. The later maturity you can grow in an area, the higher productivity you can get. And so our later maturing upland switchgrasses of Cave and Rock and New Jersey, which is Carthage actually, they were higher yielding. And so what we saw was that there was a lot of interest in the US in these lowland switchgrasses. And really it was a matter of, they were later maturity. That's why they were putting out extra biomass. And they had a better crop canopy, much like miscanthus. So we looked at miscanthus and we looked at lowland switchgrass and said, if we can breed upland switchgrass to have that kind of crop canopy and make it a little bit later maturity, then we can really bump yields. So it's not really fair to compare something like Cave and Rock against miscanthus, because miscanthus has been bred, and Cave and Rock is a found cultivar. I believe it was 1959. It was found in Southern Illinois. So we've actually like got a pretty serious breeding program together, especially the last 15 years. We did start our breeding 30 years ago, but very focused breeding effort in the last 15 years. And we've completed up to 8 breeding cycles on these materials. So they're far from native grasses now. So this was our story. These were the first fields, some of the first fields we put out. We put out 500 acres with Iogen Corporation in the late 1990s for cellulosic ethanol. And then we also put out some, Don Knott, one of the farmers in Ontario, he put out 400 acres in 2006. So those were some of the bigger acreages we saw put out. And the results were pretty modest. You know, we had some pretty, for lack of a better term, we had some pretty filthy fields. And so there was a lot of annual grass pressure. And we've learned a lot about the crop agronomy and have been able to improve the genetics of the material so we can deal with more severe weed problems. But mostly what we want to do is avoid serious annual grass pressure. And we usually do that through no-till establishment. But this is what it was all about. It was all about domesticating the crop, that native grasses were not field crops. They need to be fully domesticated. So what we did is we read the literature and we saw that, you know, single tiller emergence was a great way to improve seedling vigor. And if you could do that over many breeding cycles, you could dramatically improve the seedling vigor of the crop. So this is our nurseries about 15 years ago in an older greenhouse, and we would put out about 30,000 seeds into 1,000 of these pots, these containers. And out of that, we would select about 200. So we'd go from 30,000 seedlings down to 1,000 seedlings And out of that 1,000 seedlings, we'd choose about 250. And then we'd go to pots. And then what we would take to the field is around 200 of those 250 pots. And we went to a 1-year breeding cycle because we wanted to improve the establishment fast. And by doing 1-year breeding cycles, we can get a lot more breeding cycles in during like a 10-year period. So now we have basically all our seedlings looking like this, single tiller, and that allows us to get out of the canopy of weeds and get up and get out and see the sun. And if you have like a lot of tillering when the plants are small, well, then you get buried in weeds. So this is what we've been able to do. If you go to the far left photo, you look at that one, that's what we would call a disorganized canopy. You see those plants are shooting tillers out sideways, leaves are not erect. It's just a wild plant. So we went into a 10-year-old cave and rock field, and we selected the superior plants in that 10-year-old field, and we started our breeding cycles. And in the center picture, that's basically 10 years later. We've got an organized crop canopy. We've got something that looks like a field crop. Could look like a cereal. And then, you know, when that material matures, that's erect, very much like a lowland switchgrass. So it was all based on visual selection, running large numbers of plants, and really like trying to identify the traits that we're looking for improved plant productivity. And so this is what we consider our new ideotype of upland switchgrass. And it looks very much like lowland switchgrass. It would take a trained eye to recognize the difference, I think, if some of these plants were up against each other, like a lowland and an upland switchgrass. So we selected for increased height, reduced tillers. In fact, we want reproductive tillers, not vegetative tillers. Vegetative tillers will just get stuck in the bottom of the canopy and sometimes just rot there. And we selected for wider erect leaves. Like in the more humid zones of North America, we can put wider leaves on crops and not harm them in terms of their ability to resist drought. And like I said, we went to later maturity and high yield and early maturity materials. And we also selected for glaucous bloom. And what glaucous bloom is it's that blue-green color that you see on certain plants. Like some cereals have been selected for it. And it's an epicuticular wax. So it's just a wax. And you'll see them on plums. You'll see them even on cabbages. If you rub it, there's like a powder. And that powder is useful because it reduces heat stress at the top of the canopy and it reflects the light. So if you look at the solar energy research they're doing, all these solar panels going up, it's all about how to more efficiently use light in those solar collectors. And what we've seen is that if we can reduce the temperature on a solar panel, you get higher performance. And it's true with grasses too. You don't want to have heat stress on your grasses. And with grasses, what happens is that in the bottom of the canopy, you don't have enough light. And at the top of the canopy, you have too much light. So, we know what modern corn hybrids look like today. They're very erect. Some of them even now have the leaves above the tassel. So what we're trying to do is improve photosynthesis. We're trying to make a better solar collector. And our model species for looking at are miscanthus and lowland switchgrass. And we bred that into upland switchgrass. The beauty of upland switchgrass is that it has like no serious problems. It's winter hardy. You can cut it and it's going to be less affected by any winter stress. It has big seeds generally. Generally, they're octoploids, and octoploid seeds are much bigger than tetraploids. And all the lowland switchgrasses are tetraploids. They're very small seeded. Some of our new materials would have triple the seed weight of a lowland switchgrass. So So if you got a big seed, you have a real advantage in terms of emergence, especially on clay soils, more seed energy, easier to get up and out, and easier to clean the seeds. It's just a more professional seed. Just really nice seed to work with, big plump seeds. And so we've tried to incorporate in our new materials all these traits, a real comprehensive approach. We're not just looking for tall plants. We're looking for reduced lodging, improved seed quality, improved seed size, better seedling vigor. And, this blue-green color is improving we think it's improving our ability to reduce heat stress and be more resilient in all conditions. And so we've put out these performance trials in a number of locations, first in Quebec and Ontario, and now more recently in the US. We've had performance trials in, I believe, 5 US states: New York, Illinois, Iowa, South Dakota, and Nebraska. And we would love to have some in Pennsylvania. And yeah, just real notable improvements in terms of productivity and early season emergence. I have a video on YouTube that I can send the group a link, or maybe I sent it to Will once already, but I was a little bit afraid to boot it up in this presentation just because of all these things that can go wrong sometimes. So it's morphological selection. What does morphological mean? It means like the plant traits. So we're looking for wider leaves, taller plant, more erect structure, blue-green color. And so what we did is we've created, now we have 5 materials that we're commercializing. And we have about 12 seed growers involved in this program right now. We have about 750 acres of these materials in seed production. So potentially by the end of next year, we'd have about 150,000 pounds of improved upland switchgrass available on the market. And in the US, our main partner is Ernst Conservation Seeds in Pennsylvania. I've known Calvin Ernst since the late 1980s. And we're working with Singer Farms in Ohio. They're growing the variety in the middle, RC Sundance. And I have a few photos of their fields this spring. And Ernst Conservation Seeds has about 300 acres of RC Chippewa in production with us. So we've got some production in the northern US, and we've got growers in Ontario and Quebec, so that, if we get a drought in one area, we're good to go in another area with good seed quality. And so we've got materials, the 2 materials on the left, the Blue Jacket and what we call Tecumseh. Those were from materials that we got out of the Northern Great Plains. The Sundance in the middle, that's a cross between an improved version of Sunburst and an improved version of Cave and Rock, actually the RC Chippewa. And then the RC Big Rock, that's a late selection, about 10 days later than Cave and Rock. And so this gives us it's like corn hybrids. You got to find the right material for what you want. If you want some material to be harvested early, like in mid-September, then you've got to go to an early season maturity so you don't get any winter stress. And so our RC Blue Jacket, Tecumseh, and Sundance, they're all performing just excellently in South Dakota. And the Chippewa and the Big Rock and the Sundance are all performing well in the Great Lakes region. And we like the 2 materials, the Tecumseh and the Sundance, in more northern zones if people want to do like a fall harvest. And then, depending where you are, you could have the Chippewa, same maturity as Cave and Rock, and harvest it maybe about the 3rd week of September if you're in Pennsylvania. So so that's it. We've got materials that are adapted for more drought tolerant materials. Mostly what we've tried to do is get materials with wide adaptability, because farmers they don't like it when something bombs. And so if you can have a widely adaptable material, well, that's just reduces risk for the farmers. they always want results. So we bred materials with no fertilizers for the last 25 years, no fertilization. So these materials have extraordinarily good root systems, very well adapted to marginal soils. So this is a shot from this spring from Central Illinois, from the University of Illinois. This is a performance trial, and the lowland switchgrasses are the one on the far left, and the third one. Those are really blue, and what we're developing is blue-green materials. So these would be much more blue than Caven rock, and that's the second and the fourth material are two of ours in the performance trial in Illinois, about an hour and a half south of Chicago. So this was like I think in mid-June, and they were just doing really, really nicely. And so this is a trial we put in this spring. This is from about an hour and a half east of Montreal. But on the bottom is your standard Caven rock. And these photos were taken on the same day, about 5 weeks after planting. And that's our best new establishing material. That's what we call this RC Sundance 2. And just like very vigorous. You know, it's easily going to make our benchmark of 2 feet in 2 months. We might be setting our benchmark 3 feet high in 2 months if we can get this material to perform as well as it looks in the early stages. And that's your Caven rock on the bottom. You know, if you got good weed control and you're patient, it's going to fill in. And if you don't have good weed control and you don't have good rains and you don't have a good seed bed, you might be reseeding, or you got a problem, potentially a problematic field that won't be fully in production for maybe 3 years. And you know, we're getting material 7-8 feet tall in the second year, the year after seeding, on our improved genetic materials. And you can see the erectness in the material on top, and I'll show you more of that. So this is Singer Farms, just about I think it's about a 30 minutes southwest of Toledo, Ohio. And this is our Sundance switchgrass we have for seed production. You can see how erect that material is, how it's rowing up. If that was Caven rock, you'd see a lot of tillering. So you're just getting up and above the weeds. And you can see the plants that Scott Singer pulled out of the field. Many of you might know Scott. He worked with Pennsylvania Department of Soils and Wildlife Conservation as a wildlife conservation officer. And Scott's an expert on native grasses. And so Scott's growing these native grasses with us. And you can see those materials. There's a ruler there. And those are about 15 inches before they really start to tiller. So that's what we're aiming for. Just get out into the sunlight and get ahead of the weeds like crabgrass. And I've seen like this material smother crabgrass. Like the crabgrass is there, and then that material gets up and above the canopy of those weeds, and then it shades them, and they're gone. So that's been a major handicap for many growers, is crabgrass, and having these big seeded, robust seedling vigor materials, just with exceptional seedling vigor, they're going to improve your odds of getting a good stand faster. And then we've run the whole gamut in terms of different establishment methods, and like no-till seeding, whether it's with an air seeder or with a no-till drill, really is outperforming conventional till. And the main thing we see is just way less annual grass pressure. And in dry seasons, we tend to get better stands. So a little bit of advantage on dry seasons with moisture, but the primary advantage is you can put down a broad spectrum herbicide to kill all the weeds. And we use pre-emergent herbicides with something like glyphosate, pre-plant, and then seed, and just getting much more reliable results. We can still have misses in terms of we get a dry spring, but we've never really had a stand failure on a no-till seeding with our new genetics. And so these are some of the seed growers we're working with in Canada. This is Don Knott. He's pretty well-known farmer in Ontario. He was once farming 12,000 acres of cash crops, and he's the leading switchgrass grower in the province, and he'll produce about 35,000 pounds of switchgrass seed this year. And Normand Caron, he's in Valleyfield, Quebec, about an hour from me, and he's been growing switchgrass since 1997. And then the bottom gentleman is Ron Tunders. He's a dairy farmer, and he's been incorporating switchgrass into his dry cow rations and his milking rations and using it for bedding for over 10 years. So we have just like exceptionally beautiful stands coming on these farms. Generally speaking, these are not like these are more typical than atypical photos we'll get from farmers. And like Don Knott, the gentleman on the top left, he's got him and his son are growing a 150-acre field, and we expect that field to be 6 feet tall this fall. And he'll be producing at least 2 tons per acre of biomass. So that's another benchmark we have, 2 tons per acre in the seeding year as a harvestable field yield. So this is the field that Don has with his son. This is a new 150-acre no-till established field that he put in of our RC Big Rock material. And our benchmark, what we're aiming for, is 2 feet in 2 months. And at 6 weeks, this material is rolling. And I spoke with Don Knott last night, and he said it was mid-thigh already, and it's less than 2 months from seeding. So just really, really nice results. This is no-till. And we had an extreme drought. I think it was a D2 in terms of the drought index. So a very, very extreme drought environment at that farm this year. It's reversed now with all the rain we've got, but just really nice results, especially given the very dry spring. Here's another benchmark that we're aiming for. The old historic corn adage, knee high by the 1st of July. Well, we aim for nose high by the 1st of July. And this material is really rolling. You know, we had a pretty early spring, and it just rolled right through the spring. And, you know, there it was above my head. 30th of June, actually, this photo. So this is what we like to see. We like to see really vigorous plants. There's no herbicides on this field, and it's a seed field. We didn't need to apply herbicides even to a seed field. It was that clean. So this is what we want. We want really vigorous crops. You know, choose our soils and where we grow this, and minimize the inputs. This is a photo we had last year from Don Knott's farm. This is around Clinton, Ontario, Lake Huron. So maybe about 2 hours northeast of Detroit. And switchgrass, very vigorous, very biomassy, we would say. And just tremendous amount of biomass here. And, you know, the beauty of upland switchgrass is it's much better suited to livestock feeding programs. So you can use it in dry cow rations. You can use it for bedding. It's softer. And you can use it for physically effective fiber for dairy cows. And if you want to use it for bioeconomy markets, you can fractionate it and separate the stems from the leaves and get a real high quality product. For example, if you wanted to produce pulp and paper from the switchgrass. And so this is the system that we actually developed in Ontario. Don Knott was quite critical in developing this system. And basically the idea is that we cut it as late as possible in the fall. We'll cut it in like early November and leave it in windrows. See in the photo on the bottom right, that's snow-covered windrows. We'll leave it like that. It's biologically inert because it's so cold in Ontario. And then we bale it in the spring. So you probably can't do this in southern Pennsylvania because it's going to rot. You need to go to a fall harvest or late summer harvest system. But if you're up in northern zones, you might be able to do the fall overwintering. It works well in Ontario. Like I said, I'd say now about 80% of the production is overwintered. But the trend now is towards more late summer, early fall harvesting. with the higher yielding new materials. So this is third week of September harvest. I believe this field was harvested the 17th of September. It was mowed. And you can see up on the slope, it's yellowing a little bit. What we're looking for is physiological maturity. So with corn, when corn reaches black layer, that's physiological maturity. The grain is going to make grain. And with switchgrass, most of the root reserves or adequate root reserves are already there if you start to see that yellowing. So when it's about 55% moisture, the seed is what we would call like soft dough stage, or between soft dough stage and hard dough stage. You see the field yellowing. That's reaching physiological maturity. And that's a safe time to harvest upland switchgrass. I'm not saying you can do this with lowland switchgrass, but with upland switchgrass, you can get away with it in most, so far, that's our experience. And you don't shave it. You leave like about a 5-inch stubble. So we've been able to get very high yields out of this system. In fact, higher yields than if we overwinter the material and do the spring harvest system. So this is at the farm of Don Knott, and he cut it September 17th. You can see we laid it in a wider swath. And the beauty of switchgrass, it's not like alfalfa where it collapses. It actually dries pretty well. So you get a lot of air moving through those windrows, and it's not collapsed like alfalfa. And so quite a nice rapid drying you can get, relatively rapid in the fall. And then he would rake it on the morning that he's going to bale it. And you can see there's a field on the left where that's going to be overwintered. That's going to be like cut in November. But this is a late summer mowing system. And then here's the field yield. Those are like 1,000-pound bales, and 6 ton to the acre. They were at 8% moisture. So just a real nice product. And that's a sandy soil. That's like not the top farmland. That's a lower producing land for corn production, for example. So just a nice strategy. You got your material out earlier. You're going to market earlier. You got diversity in your markets because you can fall harvest and you can spring harvest. And we're quite excited that we've got some of these new materials. We're starting to export them. We've been exporting to the U.S. for the last 2 years, primarily working with Ernst Conservation Seeds in Pennsylvania as our partner. But we started to export materials into Europe, and we think that like countries like France are very well adapted to switchgrass, especially upland switchgrass. They don't get a lot of rain in France, hot, dry summers, and upland switchgrass will outperform lowland switchgrass in those dry environments. So some of the needs we see for the sector, we need to recognize that, especially right now, competition for land is severe. And we need to focus on these native grasses for developing less than best farmlands, which have lower land rents, and farmers are more open to developing over the longer term. We need to get carbon offset programs going for growers. Typically, switchgrass, upland switchgrass can store potentially about 1.5 tons of CO2 per acre per year. We need to keep developing these emerging opportunities for the agri-food and bioeconomy sectors, everything from mushrooms to erosion control logs to pulp and paper products. People would be familiar with the project in Tennessee. That's a fabulous project. I think just tremendous opportunity. If we can start replacing styrofoam and plastics in the food service sector. And then we need to continue to support breeding and on-farm trials and replicated performance trials, and especially on less than best lands. So, we can't have a situation where the breeding trials are done on like perfect farmland, and then when you take it to the less than best farmlands, they bomb. So, we need to be doing the testing on these less than best lands if that's the targeted land base. And finally, if you go to the Ontario Biomass Producers website, you'll find some of these publications that we've produced. There's a comprehensive guide to switchgrass management, which we're updating this winter, which is about 100 pages. And then we have two guides on, one is on sustainable livestock and poultry bedding using native grasses and warm season grasses like miscanthus. And that's really like demonstrates how, you know, all the beneficial aspects of these grasses in terms of how they're more hygienic for sustainable livestock production. And then we have another one we have on mulching, using it as a mulch. We're getting a lot of adoption in Quebec with strawberry producers. They really like the product. And some blueberry producers are using it in places like Michigan. And then you can use it for, you know, erosion control logs, different fiber applications. I'm sure most of you are familiar with those. So in closing, these are our research partners in warm season grass improvement. So in Canada, our partners have been like some of the universities like McGill University and University of Guelph and Agriculture Canada. And we're funded on our breeding program, a 5-year funding program with Bioindustrial Innovation Canada and Agriculture Canada. And in the US, some of our big partners would be University of Illinois. They're coordinating the regional testing trials in the US and in Nebraska, South Dakota, and Iowa. And we've also had trials in with Cornell University. And Ernst Conservation Seeds is just an excellent partner with us, and they're very cooperative in terms of improving agronomy and identifying, you know, where we can develop these markets and what kind of materials are performing well and where. And our main partner in Ontario in terms of producer group is the Ontario Biomass Producers Cooperative. So I can take any questions if you have any questions.
Roger, this is Will. Have you explored rust in any of your varieties?
Rust? That's the question?
Yes.
Yeah, we've
No, I hadn't had to.
I was just going to say that, you know, rust is really it's you know, it's seasonally influenced, you know, if you've got a warm, wet summer. But what we found is that the more erect we make the canopy, you know, if you get these floppy leaves, the moisture just gets held in there. And so it's lodged, it's all, you know, all intertwined, the humidity is just staying in there. If you have a nice erect canopy, you know, you're really like reducing disease pressure because the humidity can just leave in the morning. You see, you're not holding it. The worst variety for rust is a variety called sunburst because it has these hairs and it has the lodging. Okay, so when we would have graduate students walking through our nurseries doing their assessments, they would find that they would get soaked in the sunburst in the morning, and that our other materials they wouldn't be wet. So sunburst is a great material for North Dakota because it's so dry and you want the pubescence. But we don't need that pubescence in the east. So that getting rid of the pubescence really helps. Getting a more erect canopy with reduced tillering and more reproductive tillers and less vegetative tillers. And just selecting against rust. You know, our experiences with the diseases, mainly the main problem we have right now is head smut, and we treat all our seed with periacetic acid, which is seed treatment we use from the food industry. It's a little bit like acetic acid and hydrogen peroxide, and that takes the smut off the seed. And then we rotate the fields. Like most of the farmers are on a 5-year rotation on the switchgrass now, because it's just like we're growing alfalfa. We can get a couple of tons in the first year, and then you can keep it for another 4 years and then plow it up. So that's going to help on the diseases. And for rust, I mean, the main thing is to stay away from the materials that are from the northern Great Plains if you're in, for example, Pennsylvania. So you need something like cave and rock genetics that we have in our Sundance, in our Chippewa and in our big rock, that's pretty disease resistant materials if it has an erect canopy. Next question.
Anybody? Anybody online? I have another question, Roger.
This is Joanne Ivancic. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the carbon sequestration that you'd mentioned.
Well, each region has to develop its own sort of estimates of the carbon that's accumulated. You know, so if you're in something like northern Minnesota, you might have a little bit different carbon accumulation than, for example, in southern Pennsylvania. And so the scientists need to develop regional estimates, and then you also can get N2O avoidance because you have less N2O pollution coming off your fields. So there should be estimates for that can be calculated by the scientists. And then you know, if the farmer puts in, let's say that they put in you know, 100 acres on a 300-acre farm, well, as long as they keep that 100 acres in and it replaced, for example, soybean or corn production, you should be able to get the carbon credits for that increase. You can also measure it, but like plug-in values regionally would be a lot simpler for the farmers and a lot less costly. And if you had a conservative estimate, then it would probably, to me, that's the simplest way to make it work. But I've done carbon studies on switchgrass in the late 1990s. We did some of the first studies in North America on carbon accumulation in switchgrass versus cornfields, and that was published. But there's a lot of companies right now that are trying to make a business out of it, and I think, you know, that somehow there needs to be a proper monitoring system, because there's a lot of potential for abuse. There's potential for companies to get set up and then get the credits and then not pay the farmers. You know, that's a possibility. So I'm quite concerned that farmers could be taken advantage of in these carbon systems, and I think they need a real robust monitoring system. It needs to be really well thought out.
Anyone else?
Well, I have a minor question. Roger, you had mentioned that you selected for somewhat larger seed. And most of the switchgrass we've seen has about 250,000 seeds per pound. On that basis, how many seeds do you have per pound of your somewhat larger seed?
Okay, I'm gonna give you like the number for Cave and Rock. Okay, the number for Cave and Rock would be 170 milligrams per 100 seeds. Sorry, I'm a bit of a scientist, okay? So I got to give you the scientist number. 170 milligrams per 100 seeds are materials that we're growing with Ernst Conservation Seeds. They would get a seed test and it would come back with 240 milligrams per 100 seeds. So that's about a 25% increase in seed size. Okay, so that gives you an idea. So if you said there's 300,000 seeds per pound?
250, 255, something.
355? Yeah, you could talk about 280 maybe, 275.
Okay, thank you.
And if you had a lowland switchgrass, instead of being at 240, you'd be at about 80 to 100. You see? So like it's a miserable crop to get out of the ground. And that's why lowland switchgrass, one of the reasons why lowland switchgrass is so difficult to establish. Will, I think they all want to get out to the field today.
I think you're right. I had one more question. When I planted my Cave and Rock, I put 7 pounds per acre. What is your recommendation for the new seed varieties that you're developing?
Well, the thing is that most of the growers now, they want to get a first year yield. And the more seed you put out, the more you got a chance to get that 2 ton per acre. So mostly what we're telling people is 10 pound per acre. And, you know, if you can get, you know, 2 ton to the acre at what? Are you getting $150 a ton? $300. So, you know, at least you're recovering like half your seed costs in your biomass, and less weeding. What we tell people is go easy on the herbicides and trust your genetics. And we tend to not use aggressive herbicide programs, but modest levels of herbicides, and let the genetics express themselves to get up and out and ahead of the canopy. We have organic production now. I shouldn't call it organic. We have no pesticide. Farmers planting large acreages with no pesticides, like 90-acre fields planting with no pesticides. I'm not saying it's going to work everywhere, but if you have a good rotation, it can work.
And how much per pound? What's it cost?
Depends how much you want. I'm just, you know, normally what we do is we're selling roughly at about $14 Canadian a pound in Canada, and roughly it's around $14 US a pound in the US. Might be up a little bit this year because of rising commodity prices and expenses and things. Like our land rents in Ontario are $400 an acre now. You know, that's what it costs to rent a seed field. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to improve our seed growing, and so we can keep our costs kind of modest. But the idea is that you're getting extra yield, you're getting first year yield potentially, and you're getting higher second year yield. And so there's a lot of benefits to buying these improved materials versus you know, a cheaper seed.
Roger, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate all the information that you shared with us.
Very good. Well, thanks for everyone and I'm sorry that we couldn't get across the border today to join you in person.
Maybe next year.
Talk to Mr. Biden about that he can talk to Mr. Trudeau and we can fix that problem.
Okay.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Roger.
Thank you.
Those of you online, I'm going to close this meeting down and open up the second one. And we'll go again.